former President Jacob ZUMA has flipped the bird at the Zondo Commission of Inquiry into state capture, saying that he doesn't fear arrest or going to jail. His contention is that the commission is biased against him and he will in fact do everything in his power to give it a miss. So for ANC politicians, including the Justice Minister, Ronald Lamola, as well as Transport Minister Fikile Mbalula, have come out against his decision, saying no one is above the law. NGOs and opposition parties too have slammed the decision, saying Zuma needs to actually be held accountable. Well, joining me to look at what Zuma's end game is political analyst Eusebius McKaiser, as well as the executive director of CASAC, Lawson Naidu. Now, before I say hello to these gentlemen, I just want to focus viewers of The Fix on the decision and take you back to when former President Jacob ZUMA actually enacted the Commission of Inquiry. Let's have a listen.
I urge everyone to cooperate with the Commission of Inquiry. I trust that we will all respect the process and place no impediments to prevent the Commission from doing its work.
Of course, history doesn't lie, Eusebius. Before we get into the politics of this matter, legally, you have pronounced on why you think the response of Jacob ZUMA is not just ludicrous at a political level, but also quite shameful from a constitutional point of view and from a legal point of view. Take us through those points, please.
Good morning, Karima. Thank you so much for having me on your show. Good morning also to Lawson and to viewers of The Fix. You know, the statement that was released by the president, in which he explains, the former president that is, that he will not comply with the Constitutional Court's judgment and order, Karima, it is littered with all sorts of legally unconvincing claims. We'd be here for 2 hours if we went into all of them. So I want to touch on 3 that I think are probably the most important legal points to make before we talk politics. The first, Karima, is that Mr. Jacob ZUMA says that his right to be presumed innocent is undermined by the Constitutional Court. That is actually legally untrue. He's being compelled to appear before the Commission as a witness. And as a witness, you are not on trial. This is not a criminal trial. This is not a tribunal that is akin to a process where you have been accused of doing wrong. You're being asked to appear in terms of the Commissions Act as a witness. And by definition, witnesses cannot be accused or presumed to be guilty of anything because you're just being asked to give your account as a witness. So that part of his statement is legally completely balderdash. The second is that he says, this reminds me of the apartheid era legally, when laws and court judgments were enacted to target an individual rather than to be applying to every citizen in the country. And again, Karima, this makes no legal sense. In any case, you will have litigants, but the judgment in terms of its implication is that it will apply to everyone in terms of general application. So Zuma might have been one of the parties to the matter, but the consequence of the order is that the order will apply to all future witnesses that are coerced to appear before the Commission in terms of the Commissions Act. So the idea that he is being uniquely targeted the way Robert Sobukwe was by the apartheid government is simply legally false. And then the third and final point, Karima, on law is the question of what is the legal implication of him saying, I simply will not appear. Well, it's quite simple. He's undermining the principle of constitutional supremacy and embedded within that the rule of law. So if and when the Commission says you must appear on the 15th or whatever date, and he does not do so, then in fact he's breaking the law and he should in fact be charged with contempt of court. And if the Commission does not do that, then the very principle of constitutional supremacy will be trampled on.
All right, Lawson, let me bring you in here. And of course, you were a friend of the court in that constitutional court application. In the statement, you say, noting that criminal complaint has already been lodged with law enforcement agencies following Mr. Zuma's walkout from the Commission while under subpoena in November last year, we believe that each breach of the law by Mr. Zuma must result in further charges. Should Mr. Zuma fail to appear before the Commission on the 15th of February, contrary, we further urge the Commission to institute proceedings for contempt of the clear order of the Constitutional Court. Now, in that judgment that the Constitutional Court handed down, it actually, in a way, also wrapped the Commission over the knuckles for being so lenient with Jacob Zuma. It didn't go as far as you wanted it to go, to allow Mr. Zuma to get away with not self-incriminating. But the Constitutional Court was very clear that the Zondo Commission must actually act within the law. The fact that the Deputy Chief Justice has indicated that he is still to pronounce on this matter, does that confirm what the Constitutional Court say about the almost lackadaisical way and footsie way in which the Commission has actually been dealing with Jacob Zuma?
Well, good afternoon, Karima, and thank you. Indeed, I think the court was very clear that, and there were a number of questions during the Constitutional Court hearing in December, where the court asked Advocate Nguka Toby, who was representing the Commission, why the Commission hadn't acted against Mr. Zuma previously, why they took so long to issue a subpoena against him to compel him to appear, when basically Zuma was giving them the runaround for a year and a half. So the court was not pleased with the conduct of the Commission. But I think the key issue here, and Eusebius has dealt with this, but for me the central issue here is a very simple one and a straightforward one. It's about respect for the rule of law. In a constitutional democracy, and to borrow a term from the ANC's Secretary General, the rule of law is sacrosanct. It is the basis of the social contract that underpins our very constitution. Now, the courts don't have their own enforcement powers. They rely on the executive arm of the state to enforce court orders and the like. The respect for the rule of law means, voluntary compliance with those rules that we set out for our democracy. And the duty on our society is to ensure that there is compliance with that rule of law and that everybody respects it, that nobody is above the law. So I think that's a very important principle here. Now, in the Constitutional Court matter, we argued that in addition to not being able to rely on the right to silence, that Mr. Zuma, and in fact any witness before the Commission of Inquiry, in order to allow the Commission to be able to pursue its task of getting to the truth of the matter, should not be able to rely on the right against self-incrimination, because this is not a criminal process. It's a fact-finding inquiry. Unfortunately, the Constitutional Court didn't agree with us on that, but I think it was important clarification from the court that even reliance on the right against self-incrimination needs to be proven. So Mr. Zuma cannot go to the Commission and do what Ms. Dudu Myeni did, was simply to refuse to answer the most basic and innocent of questions on the basis that she might incriminate herself. So that, I think, was an important clarification from the Commission and perhaps explains some of Mr. Zuma's more recent reluctance to go and appear before the Commission and to answer questions in relation to very serious allegations that have been leveled against him in evidence that has already been presented to the Commission, where he's been implicated, I think, now by almost 40 witnesses.
Absolutely. Eusebius, let's take the law out of the argument now and return to the politics. I mean, the most recent is the spectacle that we saw of, ANC factional leaders flying with a member of the opposition and, jetting into Nkandla with a private helicopter to try and, according to newspaper reports, persuade Jacob Zuma to come before the Commission and almost kind of turn the tables on President Cyril Ramaphosa and Deputy Chief Justice Zondo. What do you make of the EFF's attempt to try and present itself as a broker of sorts to bring Zuma to the table?
Karima, the politics, quite apart from the law, is even more fascinating than the law. And I say that as someone who loves legal analyses. Before I talk about the EFF, I want to make a political comment about Jacob Zuma's statement. When he talks about his glorious anti-apartheid struggle credentials, when he invokes the memory of Robert Sobukwe, what is he trying to do politically? he's trying to do two things. Number one, he's drawing on very powerful political memory and hoping that that will land in his favor. The second thing that he's doing, Karima, which brings us into the present immediately, is that he is weaponizing factionalism within the ANC. And because the current leadership within the ANC, including Cyril Ramaphosa, managed to win based on the slimmest of margins at Nasrec, the former president knows that, in fact, there are deep cracks within the governing party, and he is weaponizing those differences and knows and banks on the fact that there's a possibility that because of the factions and the groupings within the NEC, even within the ANC's top six for that matter, its National Working Committee, that he might get away with neutralizing otherwise morally decent folk who should understand that the supremacy of the Constitution should trump party politics. So that's the game that the former president is playing. The EFF's game, I think, is very clear, which is why I was annoyed by some of our peers who were so uncritical in how they observed the spectacle on Friday. EFF is profoundly aware, and Julius Malema himself, Karima, that the ANC is in a state where you have the factions at loggerheads with each other. They went to Nkandla not because they are deeply committed to the rule of law, not because they are the gold standard of constitutional supremacists as the EFF leadership. If that were the case, we wouldn't have scandals like the ones that played out in Limpopo going all the way back to when he was the president of the ANC Youth League. What they are interested in is exploiting for short-term EFF gain those differences within the ANC. Simply put, Karima, a weakened ANC that is fighting with each other is music to the ears of the opposition, and that is the motive for them having tea.
All right, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back.